first of all, what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk a little about what a game is and stuff like that, which happened during the last talk too. But the important thing here to realize is that when you talk about definitions of games and stuff like that, it's as I think about it, it's only like important if it's helpful for you in any manner. So it's a bit of, can I use it in my creative process in some manner? If you can, then yeah, good for you. And if you can't, then obviously it's not a very good definition. So it's not about what's wrong or right, but is it helpful? That's sort of how we evaluate this stuff. So first of all, the sort of basic, I'm going to start here up here, but I think I need space. So first of all, what you have is systems. That's the first thing we're going to be talking about here. Anyone familiar with the Mda framework? No? One. Okay, so it's a very simple thing. I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to divert a little bit from how they define stuff. So first of all, we have layer 1. This is the first layer of games, of a game, and that's the mechanics. I have this planned out to be a awesome diagram in the end, so I'm just gonna see so I keep to my plan. So we have the mechanics. The mechanics is what does the groundwork, and we're talking about the sort of system mechanics here. So for example, in Mario, if you press a button, Mario jumps, and there's a certain system that can calculate how Mario jumps, and then there's another system that controls a Goomba. And if Mario jumps on a Goomba, something happens. That's another mechanic. If Mario jumps down a hole, something happens. And when you put all of that together, you get the dynamics. And this is, sorry, shit. I've also been afraid of misspelling stuff and writing stuff in a shitty way. So I'm gonna take my time here, so it looks good. It's gonna be awesome later on. So dynamics is something. It's a sort of word where if you ask 3 game designers, you get 3 different definitions. But at the same time, it's also something that's super simple. It's how the mechanics act together, basically. But so in Mario, when we talk about dynamics in Mario, it's something like, okay, if I jump on this Goomba just right next to this chasm, I'm gonna be able to have a jump height that's high enough in order for me to get over. So that's the dynamics of the system. It's using the mechanics, the sort of individual systems, into a larger whole and can create scenarios. In a game like God of War, you have Kratos can, do melee attacks, and when you do melee attacks on an opponent, certain stuff happens, and when you combine it all together, you get some sort of dynamics on it all. And now we have then on top of here, so mechanics also, there needs to be an arrow here. That's sort of the mechanics leads to the dynamics. So again, I just want to, because everything like this is simplified stuff. So obviously there's two things to it. One is that the dynamics themselves can have sort of system stuff in them. So you can have like a system that keeps track. So if you do like in Tony Hawk, if you do a really good trick, then that takes mechanics and uses them somehow. Then that's sort of mechanics in the dynamics. So but you can still think about it in this manner. But it's as always, the devil is in the details, and it's not as easy as it seems. But when we're doing this sort of stuff, I think it's very important to try and keep it so simple that you can sort of keep it in your head. And this is gonna get a hell of a lot more complicated. So, but just a caveat there, a disclaimer that it's there's always smaller stuff to take into account here as well. Then on top we have the aesthetics. Okay, shit. I'm just gonna spell this correctly because otherwise someone is gonna be angry for the rest of the another E? No, it's aesthetics. So okay, sorry. Yeah. So that's correct. No one is angry like some grammar Nazi here, like really fueling up. It's like I didn't catch what it fucking couldn't spell aesthetics. I was so angry. How could he run a company? The fool. Okay, so here we got what we call the MDA framework, and what they do in the MDA framework is that they think about the whole, as in with the art and all that stuff in this sort of framework. You go from mechanics, dynamics to aesthetics, and aesthetics is I'm just pick the word because it's mechanics and dynamics is in the MDA framework, so why not use their word for the top thing? And that's basically the feel of the game. So when you're playing Mario and then dynamics is in a certain way, it's it's how it's like to play Mario. That's an aesthetic and stuff like that. How it's like to play Call of Duty, how it's like to play God of War. God of War might have very similar mechanics to something like Dark Souls, but the dynamics then differ quite a bit, and then the aesthetics differ like really quite a bit. So this is sort of the simple stuff. So then what we have next is that we have our basic systems. Then we get to the story layer. Now, when I talk about story, I don't talk about plot. So you often hear story being said as, the guy went from there to there to there to there, and it's a very sort of plotted experience. But when you're doing games, plots is, it has its place, but it feels like something. It's not something you want to focus on, because there's a hell of a lot more to story than just a plot. So when I think about story, it's stuff like themes. I'm gonna write it down here. So themes. It's the plot. It's a sub stuff, a sub thing of the story. It's the setting. Is it in the Middle Ages? Is it raining when you're doing stuff? Is there a lot of fog, etc.? Characters who is in the story, and then we have. I'm gonna continue here. Then we have stuff like narration. How is the story told? Like a game like Bastion, with an omnipresent narrator that chats about stuff. And even in old games, like in Asteroid, you'd have like the arcade booth or the cover art, like box art and stuff like that. That story, I'm really you see the game and you're like looking at, there's a triangle and there's this other stuff, and you look at the box. Oh, it's a spaceship. Oh yeah, I'm blowing up asteroids. Awesome, and even in the name Asteroids, in Space Invaders, like shit, what is this? Oh, it's called Space Invaders. It's just gotta be Space Invaders. So in early times, you had story that was very, very weak, or very sort of, there wasn't much of it. But nowadays you have a hell of a lot more to the story. And another sort of thing here is that I think about story. I'm going to come to that in a bit, but another thing to keep in mind is that when I talk about storytelling in games, I feel that all games tell a story in some way. So again, just using Super Mario as an example, if you're playing Super Mario 3 and you board Bowser's wooden ship, you dodge some cannonballs, and you eventually go and fight one of Bowser's sons and defeat him, that's a narrative unfolding. That's a story. That's a story being told. So that's very important to the discussion to be had here. So you have your aesthetics, you have your dynamics, you have your mechanics, but this is just systems. You want to address this as something. So in Super Mario, what you have in like the real Super Mario, I'm just going to draw here. What you have is really, you have a bounce at the edge of the screen where if you have some control that says that if Mario is here, if his collision box or his center, I'm not sure what they go on actually, if his center of his body is down here, if it's even the top, then it's game over. Sort of, you have to restart the level, and that's a system here on a chasm. But in the game, the chasm has to have a special aesthetic. It can't just be, you want to have it at a special place, you want it to look a special way, especially in later games like something like Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Galaxy. Your chasms are going to look like chasms. So what you have here is, I'm just going to word here from film so everyone can like learn. If you haven't heard it yet, you can like, oh no, I learned a new tune. So what? What? No. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I'm dependent. I'm drawing too much. So what we have here is, yeah, okay. Sorry. Oh, it's shit. This was gonna be all black and beautiful, and now it's ruined. So what we have here, yeah, I'm just gonna stop and go home now. So fuck this. If I can't have my diagram in black, it does nothing matters anymore. So no, it's okay. This now stories in blue. Stories in blue. This is like this is educational. So we have something mise en scene, which is a term from film, which is pretty good because it encompasses lightning and stuff like lightning costumes, whatever is in the scene, and obviously a chasm is in the scene. So when you build a game, you want to make sure that the mechanics come through as something. You know, if it's just the player needs to know why you're falling down the pit and stuff like that. So the player is going to know that they fall down a pit because because it looks like a pit. Okay, that's awesome. So then when you have here, and once you get to your mise en scene, which is objects and stuff like that, it's basically art. Like the Goombas are in a specific manner in order. When you do your art, that's a specific thing. And then what you have here is that you go to drama. So when all the mise en scene and the mechanics and all of this come together, you get some sort of drama. So you get a battle in God of War, you get Mario leaping over cannonballs. It's some sort of drama. As I said about the story, you can have here in the system, Mario is using a specific algorithm that calculates a parabola, probably using Euler integration, and it uses that in order to overcome some sort of moving object. You know, it's very abstract. You know, the system doesn't care if it's a cannonball. It cares about its rules. But here we can say, okay, the mise en scene means that it's gonna be a cannonball. Mario is gonna be a human, like a little fat plumber with a mustache, and he's gonna jump that. Oh, we got drama. So this is another layer, and I'm gonna go further here. And then when you get all the way here, you get to narrative. So from the mise en scene, the objects to build a scene, you add some drama to it, and then you have a narrative. As I said before, when Mario tries to save the princess or try to defeat one of Bowser's kids, you have a narrative that unfolds. Again, you just want to be sort of specific here again, so I'm making myself clear, is that when you think about this is basically, this here is what you want the player to what the player should be seeing as they're doing their stuff. And in a game like Tetris, this doesn't really matter, because it doesn't matter if the Tetris blocks are like, is it crystals, is it stone? It doesn't really matter that much to that game, because these two, like, they're very, very similar. You can play Tetris in a very abstract way. Mario loses a lot of the appeal if you remove this. You could just have squares and circles and stuff like that in a Mario game, which is this space. I'm gonna say space from now on, so we know the system space. So you can play Mario in the system space, but in the story space, it's harder. And the same goes for other for other games, like an adventure game would be very hard to play in system space, because you wouldn't know what the hell any object would be. It's very, very important that you know what the object is. So far, so good. We have our aesthetics. We have our sort of story layer over here, but this is not all there is. So I'm gonna I'm gonna make it green. Oh, the top one, but I want a different color. So I'm gonna. Oh, the green one was. Oh, beautiful. My precious little diagram. So, what we're going for here is that something else happens. So when you combine all this, black again. See here. Is this is visible from? I think so. I'm gonna do it a little more. You get into what we're gonna call the mental model, and this is a little bit of a different beast here. this is this is an actual design concept that I do not feel is discussed enough and that enough think about. But the thing is that when you're playing a game that uses all of this, you think that you sort of, yeah, I see Mario as a collection, I see Mario on the screen, and then obviously I think about Mario and I do stuff according what the game tells me. But what you're really doing is that you're doing stuff according to your mental model of how you think everything behaves. So simple example from a game here. See here, can I? I'm gonna do it down here and then erase it. So say that you have a corridor like this, and you want to go from A to B. How in a game, if you just think about it, is as all systems. The player would be like, okay, I need to test the system here. And so I'm just going to go like this, and I'm going to go like that. Okay, that's a wall, that's a wall. Okay, that's a wall, that's a wall. Oh, going great progress here. Oh, yeah, I got to be, and that's a very sort of, you don't do that. Nobody does that. My dad does that when he plays games, but that's a different thing. But what you do is that you have a mental, because of what you know about the mechanics, because you played it a bit, and you know that when I'm going to press forward, this is going to happen. I'm going to have some acceleration. I'm going to move forward, and I know that I'm going to bump into this stuff. And this look like walls from my perspective. So I probably can't pass them. And what you do then is that in your mind you make up a plan that okay, I'm gonna do this because this is an important thing. So you make up a plan in your head. That was crappy, but it's a plan, so it's okay. In a plan in your head that I'm gonna go that way, and then using your sort of intuitive understanding of the controls, you go that way, and you get there. And that means that when you're playing a game, a lot of it is actually spent in your own head, just thinking about what you know about the systems, what is your intuitive knowledge of the systems. And this is also why if you were to bump into, say, an invisible wall here, which we all love, where the game says, oh, you can't go anymore, you bump into it there, then that sucks. What a crappy game, because it violated what your mental model was of the game. So it's vital to making sure that the player's mental model is correct as much as possible. Even if a player dies, if you die in Super Mario, it's like, oh no, the axe is coming at me, oh, I'm gonna die. You know it before the axe hits you. And you're simulating in your own head almost. You can sort of, you drop the controller before it's all over, like, oh no. And so that's a very, very important thing to think about. So what we then have here, over here, is that we have at the very lower edge we have something called affordance, which is another one of those nice words that all should know about. It's basically how we interpret things. So when we see a coffee mug, we know that, it has a hole right there, which is perfect for my fingers, and you know how to grasp it. And the same thing here is with affordance, and you have a lot of these mental models of the mise-en-scene, and it's a combination of, it's not just a combination of the layer here, it's the affordance defines how the player is gonna interpret these two things. It's sort of, this is the level where it works on, but it's really defined by all of these. So the narrative, if you have a game that works in a specific way, when you see something, I know. So for instance, just a simple thing, if you have a game where every time you pick up treasure chests, you always get coins, but then you have another game like, say, Dark Souls, I think it's Dark Souls, where the treasure chests can turn into monsters. Then all of a sudden, a treasure chest, and affordance in one game can be like gold, like in Diablo, when I don't think they have monsters, at least not in the first one. You click on it and you just get gold. But in something like Dark Souls, it can be shit. This treasure chest. I'm gonna be very careful now. It's a totally different affordance, and totally is very different from how you're gonna play the game going forward. then what we have here, and that just doesn't depend on the mechanics, it depends on all of it with the narrative and stuff like that as well. So then what we have here is what we call schemas, and that's what sort of how you interpret the dynamics and the drama. And schemas, plural of schema, is what you how you imagine stuff working together. So a simple example from psychology is that you enter a restaurant and you have a sort of intuitive rules of how a restaurant works. You don't go into the kitchen. But you know, if you've never been in a restaurant, why? Okay, I'm gonna prepare some food. You know, I'm just going into the kitchen. But no one does that because you have a schema of how a restaurant is supposed to work. It's the same way you have in Super Mario. You're not just gonna stand there. So I'm just gonna stand here and someone will catch me. There's a great. Or come and get me, you know, so I don't want to go here alone. There's a great blog post from one of the Telltale guys. No, it is one of Telltale guys. I'm not sure if one. But anyway, he gets his mother to play Sam and Max. And the cutscene ends, and she just sits there. And she says, so, what are you waiting for? So she says, yeah, well, I'm waiting for them to do something. You know, I mean, you know, her expectations of what the game was about. He knew that the cutscene was over. There's a ton of schemas in his mind already on how a game works. But for her, her mind was blank. She knew, okay, what was her schema for that situation? Oh, it's a sitcom or something like that. A very twisted sitcom, you know, with a rabbit and a talking dog. But you know. Nonetheless, it was something she could sort of learn from. So you know, I'm just gonna sit there. And then on the other hand, here we have the sort of mindscape, which is a word that I tried when. This is me getting into. This is not something that's established game theory or anything. This is me making shit up, especially with words. Those are defined psychology stuff, but mindscape is just something that we use to define the totality of the experience, how you represent it in your head. How is the game like? Not how the designer thought it, not how the systems say it is, but how the game says it is. And I need to just explain a little bit, but how stuff like this then work is that you have mechanics. Say that you have a role-playing game, and you have in your role-playing game, you can befriend a rabbit, and he's hilarious. And he just walks next to you, and he constantly says stupid things depending on what else is happening. And then the idea is to be able to make the designer's idea is to make a very lovable companion rabbit. And what happens in the mechanics view, the systems view, is that he has some sort of pathfinding. He knows that he needs to be close to the player, and he has some certain rules that he doesn't know shit about what's happening here, but he has certain rules that are going to play sound bites depending on. He's going to have a large library of sound bites, and he's going to pick out those lines depending on the situation. So, but here in the mise-en-scene and the drama, what we have mise-en-scene, we have a rabbit. So we're gonna make this as rabbits are cute. It's gonna be hilarious when you design this. Oh, fuck! Oh, the rabbit. Oh, he's gonna be great. And then the drama is when you have a situation. So the player is just killed like an ogre or something like that, and he says, "Oh, good going, master," or something like that. You know, cheerio. And then that's great drama. So we have something here that's intended. So you have planned a certain drama to happen that happens depending on the dynamics. Dynamics is something an enemy gets killed, a quip gets played, and the drama is that you have certain lines that are to be played in the mise-en-scene, and then when that combines with you seeing the dragon or ogre, I think I said it before, ogre being slain, so something happened. But then what happens in the player's head here can be very depend a lot. So say that the player notices this the first time he does, and it's like, oh, the rabbit is hilarious. It's like, cheerio, old mate, he says, and then you kill another ogre, and the rabbit says, oh, cheerio, mate. So didn't you say that last time, rabbit? And and then later on you kill another ogre, and he's like, cheerio, mate, and like, what the fuck? You know, suddenly you start noticing the system here. He's not a rabbit. You know, that's not a rabbit. He's just playing canned lines. The bastard. He lied to me. You know, suddenly you go from the story layer. You don't notice that. You just notice the systems instead. So so what you're doing there is that the mental model of the rabbit is suddenly changed, and then perhaps you can notice that if you let the ogre kill him, he's gonna cost you. He's gonna throw you a health potion, because the system here thinks that if he's killed, then the player must be really bad because he's a lovable rabbit. The player would never allow anything bad to happen to him. But now you've just figured out that he might not be the rabbit I first thought he was. So now you do that. You lure him to the ogre, and the ogre bashes him and said, "Oh, help me, master! Help me, master!" And he's just throwing health potions at you. And normally the intended drama here is that, "Oh, I'm gonna save you, rabbit," but you're like, "Oh, he's just an automaton. Give me those juicy health potions." So all of a sudden you go into the systems view more, and you have and it's a little bit of because you can think it's hilarious still. Your schema here is going to be very different. It's going to be sort of a mixture of all of these things, and these are the things that you think about. This is the way that you actually play the game. And I just want to make a sort of thing here about mental models and stuff like that. It's very interesting. We think that we sort of see, when we look around here in the room, we sort of see reality as it is. We see this sort of high screen photo or whatever thing is. But when we look at each and everyone's faces, now I'm gonna get uncomfortable looking at everyone's faces. We sort of suddenly get, oh, that's him, that's her, that's her. You just get that instantly. You recognize a person. But if someone were to describe to you someone in this room just by saying, "Oh, dark hair, some beard," it would be very hard to what are the defining features of this person. You don't really know that. You just get what really happens in your brain is that what you do with faces mostly is that you measure the ratio between different points on the face, like ratio from here to here, from eye to eye, and that's how mostly you do to recognize a face. And then that information just pops at you. So you can actually have people that can't see faces. They would look at an audience and they'd be like, "Shit, this is it's just a bunch of similar looking." So there's some some black hair, some little hair, some beard, and if they look really close, they say, "Okay, some glasses here as well." They can't do that. We think of that as like it's the simplest thing in the world. We really do not think about and anything else, but there happens so much in our head that really is beyond what we think about. There's another, it's called Kafka's illusion. I can't recall. Anyway, there's a very cool illusion, or horrible actually, where you can recognize faces, but what normally happens when you recognize faces is that there goes a signal to a certain memory, and that tingles a certain emotion in you. So when you look at your mother, that's going to tingle a certain emotion in you. Well, what happens with these people is that they never get that emotion. So they just look at their mother and they're like, get nothing. And you don't think, I can't think of what that emotion is. But what happens is these people is that they think that their mother is an imposter. Because someone has come here and replaced my mother. She is not who she used to be. And there has even been murders because of this. They go mad because of this. And it's a very sort of weird thing. And again, that's what happens. So the face is here. So the face is the mechanics is in how these two interact. But what happens here is very differently. So if you're not careful with how you're gonna design these things, then you're gonna get a very sort of bad. You might not get at all what you thought, like what happened to the rabbit and stuff like that. Next part is another. We're going deeper down the hole now. So one thing that I've started thinking about this a lot. So it didn't occur to me until very, very recently. When we released Soma, a lot of people thought that the game had less gameplay than Amnesia, but I was like, shit, how can this be? Because the game there's more stuff to do in Soma than there was in Amnesia. There's more variation to it. There's a lot more to do. There's more sort of interactions to do. You get a lot of more freedom with stuff, but still people feel like there's less gameplay in it. And I started thinking, okay, what are the things that are different? And the stuff that are different in those two games are stuff like the sanity system, and the puzzles are often spread out over a larger area, and there's more parts to it. And there's also the enemies have some extra. You can sort of hide behind doors. You can make some sort of tactics with them. But I didn't think more on that. Then I played a game called Until Dawn, and for some reason, I felt like there was a lot more gameplay in that. And Until Dawn is basically an interactive teen slasher. And I thought that there was more gameplay in that game than what I usually see in these sort of interactive movies. And then it occurred to me that there is two things that happens when I play that game. So one is that you have these totems you can find, and these totems, they warn you about future events. And it's also that I'm not going to spoil too much, but there's certain events that there's a certain twist to the story that you can figure out early on, and then you can make choices on who to save, for instance, in the typical interactive movie way, early on. So you can make choices depending on that. And then I thought, okay, what do these things have in common? They have in common that you can plan. And you can plan ahead. And just because you could plan ahead, you got a lot of more gameplay bang for the buck. It just felt like that. And it's very subjective Until Dawn. If you don't get the twist, or if you don't think you don't think in a specific way, you're not going to get it. The totems are very vague. You're sort of lucky if you can find the right ones and come into the right situations. But I did, and I found that this is more gameplay. So there's planning, and then I started looking at, okay, what were the things that separated Amnesia from Soma? Well, you had in Amnesia, you had the sanity system. What does sanity do? Well, it allows you to do tactical decisions where you had to think in advance. Oh, should I stay in the dark? Because in Amnesia, if you stay in the dark, you're going to lose your sanity. So you want to stay in the light, but in the light, the enemies can see you. So when you see a certain area, you can again, in your mental model, make up a plan for how you're going to go about. And the same with the puzzles is that the puzzles were always or were mostly about many different parts. You have to think, okay, I can first solve this, and then I can solve that, and then I can solve that. And so it occurred to me. So now, again, we're in not crackpot area, but slightly. So my sort of thing here is that planning is actually perhaps like a really important thing. So I'm gonna and I started thinking more about, if you say in recent games, like a game, going back to Dark Souls, why it's something that many people I've longed for these games again. And the more I thought about there's a lot of planning in Dark Souls. More if you compare it to a game like God of War, where you can just rush into a combat and you can win it. In Dark Souls, you have to be very tactical. You have to plan. So what we can do then is that if we start thinking about gameplay as actually. We need to define something else first. We need to define something called an action. So just bear with me. So an action is basically layer 1 is like all of this. So all this is layer 1, all this is layer 2. So action is basically doing stuff in layer 1 and layer 2, one or more things in order to get a specific outcome. So if a good action then is that if I slam my axe at someone, they're gonna lose health points, or I kill them. If I stab them in the back, they're gonna lose a lot more health points. That's a good action. So stabbing them in the back, and then another action might be, okay, if I take a long route around, they're not gonna spot me. So I can they're not gonna charge me, and I can stab them in the back undetected. So okay, now then you have two actions, and those together form a plan. So actions are just 1 plus, I'm just going to read 1 plus layer 1 and or 2 till a specific outcome. So then we know. So now we know what an action is. So then planning. So planning is a bit interesting, and it gets easier when you have this chart here. So what you do when you plan is that you first think about your actions in mental space, and then you execute them in system space. So really shit. Gameplay. Yeah, so planning is that, and that's basically a lot of basics around pretty much any gameplay. It's all about this. You first think about how you're going to do it in your mental model, and this relies to even a game like Tetris. You have a mental model. If I'm gonna do my blocks like that, and then it's gonna be perfect. That never happens to me in Tetris. It's always I can't get that down, and But a good player can do that in Tetris. You do that in Super Mario. You do a tactic. I'm going to jump on the scoop in order to get over that chasm and stuff like that. That's plans, and they always happen in the mental model first, and then they're executed in the system model. So planning is first a number of steps in mental model. So in the mental model or mental model space. And then you execute. So plan, like the planning in mental model, and then to execute. Sorry, writing is crap. In systems. And this is actually interesting because we can actually from this we can derive a lot of interesting stuff. So say that in a game like Heavy Rain or an interactive movie, a lot of people are annoyed because their choices doesn't matter, and some say, but it's picking the decision that's matter and stuff like that. And I first thought, whiny people, why whine about that? But then I started thinking about no, they're not whining. They're just more sensitive to this gameplay things, or that they have a different, a subjective. Their mind model is a little bit different when making the choices. So they can see more clearly than everyone. They're not more whinier. They just see things a little bit more clearly. So what they're doing in Heavy Rain, for instance, or in Until Dawn or whatever interactive movie, is that you're making a mental model of what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk to her, then we're gonna pick up the axe, and then we're gonna and then when I picked up the axe, I can smash the door, or even actually better example is actually I'm gonna talk to this guy, I'm gonna be very friendly to him, and then he's gonna help me out later on. And then when it turns out that you understand that later on he just does the same thing. There's some Deus Ex Machina like, I want to help you out, but there's a rock in the way. Let's just go to the to the path that the designers thought we were gonna walk in. Then the planning is ruined because the mental model that worked great, awesome. Now executing systems that failed. Gameplay sucks. So you can evaluate like that in these things, and it can fail on many different levels. Then you also have something like an adventure puzzle. So typical adventure puzzle is like, okay, shit, I have this puzzle, I have a rope, I need to tie it somewhere in order to lift the trapdoor, and I can tighten that pulley, and then I can put a rock on it, and it's gonna go down. Oh, fucking great! I'm the best. I'm so smart. And then you do it, and then the game says, I can't pick that up. So and like, what the fuck? I tried picking up the rope. Obviously, my mind model said I could pick up the rope. And what happens eventually in these games, as you can see, is that what you're going to be doing, your mind model is going to shrink here. So you're going to see, nothing matters. There's no ropes, doesn't exist anymore. It's just a clickable area. You don't see it as a system and as a story thing anymore, which is crucial for adventure games. You see it as a system. So what you're going to be doing is you're just going to be clicking pixel hunting for the right solution, trying every possible combination that can in order to reach your state. And that's going to mean that your planning is just going to be one step. It's going to be like, I'm going to click here, I'm going to do that, I'm going to try that. That's no fun. That's no gameplay. So then we actually have another heuristic here, that the more steps, the more shit. And sorry, I didn't thought I was going to be on my knees, but you never know when that happens. The more and meaningful actions you can plan equals better gameplay. Not always. There's as I said before, this is not the whole truth. I mean, if the gameplay is boring, then you can have as many actions as you want. It's not going to be more fun. But it's a very interesting heuristic. It's a very interesting filter to filter this through. And as I thought about Soma more, and it's like, shit, we have no planning. It's no wonder. I never thought about this in that position. And I actually scavenged the internet for 2 days, and shit, I can't be alone thinking about planning. But there was surprising little. Often when you talk about planning, you think about emergence. So sort of that. Shut up, Signal. You think about emergence in that sort of way, but you never think about planning as something that happens in just about every sort of gameplay. So, what time is it? Is it? Oh, it's 8. That's why. Is it gonna beep forever? Oh my god. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the more meaningful actions, the better the gameplay. And then when you have this sort of setup, it's very sort of easy to think about. Okay, it happens in the mental model. Then we do it in this way, but we want the player to figure it out like that. So you can. It's not, as I said before. This is not like something that you can. It's not gonna apply to everything, but it can apply to a few things, and you can think about it, and you can see it in other sort of games. And same when you have crafting system. Why the hell do they add crafting system? You can think about, oh, it's a good feedback loop. It feels good to progress, but it also allows you to plan more. Or I'm gonna pick this up, I'm gonna pick that up, and then I have 3 scissors, and I can do a shiv. And then when I have the shiv, I can have 1-hit kill on these big monsters as you have in The Last of Us. That's planning. That's great. So you add another stage of planning, and you're seeing it more and more in games. And you see another sort of meta games where you can have RPG leveling and stuff like that. And it's happening, and I think that's happening because normally in games, say something like Uncharted. A big thing that Uncharted relies on is spectacle, new levels, new stuff. Not a lot of planning in Uncharted, but it can rely on spectacle. That's very, very hard to keep up. Whereas it's a game as Dark Souls, which has very good technical planning, lots of stuff you can do here, has a lot more longevity, and you can replay the game because it has all of these stages. Whereas something like Uncharted, it's still a very good game, but it relies on being constantly unique, that's constantly shifting things up. And then you see in something like Last of Us where it's a bit same. Okay, we need to have crafting, because you need to add that, and you can run it through this filter. Again, there's other reasons for it too, but you can run it through this filter, and it allows for more planning. So it's an interesting thing to think about when you're thinking about your gameplay in a game. Is that okay? How is my planning currently? How many steps can the player mentally prepare, and how good are those steps to how much can he possibly be able to do then in the system? How many of these are going to be valid of the steps that he plans? Then moving on here, there's some other sort of interesting things that you can think about from this is that what you're aiming for when you're doing good interactive storytelling, for instance, is that you want to make sure that your mental model overlaps as much as with this. You don't want to get the bad rabbit partnered, because that's when you're going to that area. So you can sort of see, you want to think about how your story reflects your mental model in order to get the right results, like that. And I think I could ramble more here, but other stuff. But I think that I've run this to its conclusion. So any questions or anything like that on this? Yeah, go ahead.
Is this based on
No, this is this a lot of this is I've written a lot on how these things combine. There's a great book by Brian Upton called The Aesthetics of Play. It doesn't go through everything, but it goes a lot through the mental models, how that shapes stuff, which is good. Really good stuff. But otherwise, it's talking to other designers and stuff like that. So it's not a lot of it's expressed. The whole planning thing is as I said, that's recent thing. I'm still not I'm still not 100% sure that it's a really correct theory to work against. But I talked to another friend designer who usually calls out on my shit, and he said, "Oh yeah, that sounds really good." So at least it's something. So I'm gonna go for it a little bit more. It's something I'm gonna think about more in our upcoming games. This is not like a silver bullet for every design problem. When you're collecting coins, there's a planning. If you're doing in Super Mario, there's a very good planning involved in that, because you have tons of coins on your screen, and you want to make sure that you pick up them all, or that you go into a new setting, and you want to think, okay, where can I find the coins and stuff like that. So there's a lot of planning in picking up the coins, and then also, which I think is very important with the planning, and I didn't say it, so planning is also you need to reach a goal, otherwise the planning is not good. So then you need to have 100 coins in Mario because I get an extra life, or just to get a better score this time, or it could be that in another game to buy a certain type of equipment. But then you also have, why do you collect coins? Because you like status. That's a sort of psychological phenomena. It feels good. So it's not just all this. But I also feel that if you go by it, if you just collect, which is better when you're collecting coins in a game? Collecting coins just to get a lot of coins, or collecting coins because, oh, when I get 1,000 coins, I can buy that weapon and that gear, and then I'm gonna go into that other cave and I'm gonna blast those monsters. That's at least to me, that's a lot more interesting. That's what's engaging. If you just collect coins, and I still do, I just gotta have more coins, because it gives you a little rush, like the one armed bandit sort of thing. But I feel that the sort of engagement goes down a lot. You're more into your sort of addict state than in your, I'm playing a very interesting game state.